So today in the DIY and decorating workshop, I'm going to be talking to you all about the different types of hammers you can use. So as you can see in front of me, this is just a few of the different types of hammers that are around these days and that are getting used. Right from the ones that we know, like the claw hammer, to maybe something we don't know, like the brick hammer. So let's go through one by one and see what they're for. Okay, so let's start here. As I said, the brick hammer. This is a funny looking hammer, but basically what this does, this is a bricklayer's tool, and they literally bang a brick in their hand and all the way round, and it literally just snaps in half, and that's what they use the brick hammer for. The next hammer we've got here, this is an engineer's hammer, and this is really much more for metal work, fabrication and that sort of thing. So shaping metalwork and banging nails and things like that, and taking out dents and things like that. So that's your engineer's style hammer. The next one, I love this one. It's heavy, it's a beast. This is a lump hammer, and it is a lump. It comes in two weights. This is a 4 ounce, and then you can get the slightly smaller 2 ounce, and this is for demolition. So great if you're knocking down a wall, or a small wall, not a massive wall. Small demolition jobs really, knocking stuff about. I use it quite often in the workshop when I'm dismantling difficult furniture. So this next one is a woodworker's mallet. This is a wooden mallet, and this is traditionally used for probably knocking woodworkers' joints together, pieces of wood, knocking them together. Being wood, it's a lot softer and a lot less harsh than a metal one, so they're not going to ruin their work and mark their wood. So it looks pristine still, and some of them will also use it for chiseling and that sort of activity. Another hammer we've got here, this is called the pin hammer or pin hammer, P-I-N? P-I-E-N. I'll have to check. Anyway, so this is really for smaller nails. This is a lot lighter for using for smaller nails, and then this flat end just drives them in at the very end, so you don't get any marks on your surfaces. The next hammer we've got is the good old claw hammer. This is the one that you're going to be familiar with. Familiar, yeah, that's right. Familiar with. Probably at home you've probably got a claw hammer. Lots of different types of claw hammer. So you can get ones with wooden handles. You're probably more likely to have this version where you've got the metal handle. This is a hollow one, so this isn't the strongest one that you're going to get. A lot of them have a completely metal shaft that goes all the way through, and they're the ones that the carpenters would use. If you were a trade, you're going to buy, a more expensive hammer. But this is great for the DIY jobs that we use mostly around the house. Moving on, we've got the rubber mallet. If you ever go camping and you need to knock in your tent pegs, you're going to use a rubber mallet. This is a small one. You can get bigger ones, and the bigger ones are used for laying big paving slabs. You knock them in, it's a little bit softer, so you don't break the slabs. If you're going to use that to tap the slabs down, you're going to break them. They're going to crack. But with a rubber mallet, that doesn't do it. They come in two colours, not because they look pretty, but because they serve a function. So the black one, this is a bit of a harder rubber, and then you can get a white version of this as well, which is a much softer rubber. So depending on what you're doing, you can choose which rubber mallet is the best for your job. Moving on again, we've got this little fella. These come off these ends. This is a nylon hammer, so these ends are nylon, and they're interchangeable as well. So the grey one is slightly softer than this white one, and this is great. I use this, it's when you don't want to damage the surface at all. So I use this when I'm putting furniture back together, or anything that is on a delicate surface and I don't want to mark that surface. I will use my nylon hammer. And the last hammer I've got with me, This is called a tack hammer or an upholsterer's hammer. And the great engineering thing about this, it's got a slit in it there. And these, then it makes that magnetised. You've got the two poles, science, I don't really get it. But the upholsterers would have pins, tacks in their mouth, and then they just do that and it would stick onto there as a magnet, and then they could hammer it in, and they could do it as fast as we could probably staple these days. If I'm doing any upholstery, I'm getting my staple gun out, but this is the traditional way and still used, and just a beautiful little thing. Great engineering, I love it. So there's our hammers, there's our range of hammers. So I'm going to move on and I'm going to show you how to use a basic claw hammer. You're not really going to use any of these for your basic home maintenance. So you may think, well, oh, Lou, I know how to use a hammer, which is fair enough. But I thought what I'd show you is the correct way to hold it, how to hold the nail, and maybe a few little tips and tricks as well. So how do we hold our claw hammer? Pretty simple, really. We put our hand into the middle of the grip, and then our thumb comes over onto the top and in line with the shaft, and you're ready to go. Okay, so let's get the nail in the piece of wood, shall we? So holding our hammer in the correct position. Another good tip is when you're holding a nail, most people, they'll hold it at the base of the nail. And what's going to happen, what could happen, is when you're tapping it in and your hammer slips, that's when we get little accidents and start hitting our thumb or our finger, and that hurts. So what I suggest is holding it towards the top of the nail, and that way you've got the same amount of stability, even more, and then when you're hammering, and if you slip, you're less likely to smash your fingers and you're just going to hit the wood instead. So that is a good tip. So again, using the weight of the hammer. So when you do a couple of taps, 3 taps I used, and then take your hand away when you've got it down far enough that you can just use the weight of the hammer to drive it home all the way in. So we've put our nail in and we've gone, oh no, that's just a nightmare. And that's what this part of the hammer is for. You hook it in, pull it up and extract your nail. So we've hammered in our nail. Then we've realised actually it's in the wrong place. But let's pretend we're using a really nice finished piece of wood. If you're putting a shelf together and you don't want it marked, get yourself an extra piece of wood. So instead of using the hammer on the wood, which could dent it, if you get a scrap piece of old wood and use the wood as the leverage, number one, it's easier to get out, but you don't mark the wood. So you've got a nail. Again, you don't want it in there. Sometimes if you've got a really big nail and you want to get it out, it won't come out because of where it is. Or it's so deep in, it's such a long nail, you can't get it out. So a good tip is instead of coming this way with it, you go sideways. So you bend it sideways and then sideways again, and then one more time, and it just pops out. So if you're using this small type of nail, this particular nail is a veneer nail, you're going to need a smaller hammer. So a pin hammer is a great addition for your kit for the small nails, and the same principle applies. Although you've got to be really careful of your fingers in this one because they are so small. But the same principle applies. So if you're having a bit of trouble holding the nail because you've got, I don't know, sausage fingers or something, Get yourself some pliers and let the pliers hold it. So then use the pliers, make sure you've got it. Get your hammer. In you go. Lovely safety tip. So there we have it. The user's guide to the humble hammer. Now we know how to. With Lou. That's me. I'll get my coat.